We are in southeast Durham at Lick Creek with Samantha Krop, the Neuse Riverkeeper. For more than 18 months, Samantha has been documenting a crisis of sediment pollution from active development sites dirtying Lick Creek and Falls Lake downstream. Samantha hosted a walk on Lick Creek and talked about water quality, the problem of sediment pollution, and solutions.
Just to orient us to where we are, this waterway here is Lick Creek, and it travels, so this is upstream and it's traveling downstream, and down there is Falls Lake. Maybe how many miles? 1.5 miles? So not far, we're meeting Falls Lake. This here is a tributary of Lick Creek called Martin Branch. So Martin Branch is one of Lick Creek's main tributaries. It flows behind Morio's house. But I think some folks over here ask, like, what's this coming from? Which is a really good question. This is pretty much what I have been seeing most of the time in the course of the 18 months that I have been sampling here. And this is the result of runoff from construction sites that is either running right off of cleared land or being pumped out of sediment basins and directly into streams. The latter practice is considered normal best practices, and it's not working because Durham's soils are so particular and sensitive, and because so much development is happening here. But the former issue of dirt just running off of construction sites, that's a violation. That's not allowed. And that is why we are involved in a legal case against one developer who we know is polluting this creek and contributing to this particular problem. So that's kind of what's going on here. I think it's worth noting that Lick Creek is a federally impaired waterway for benthic populations. What that means is like the little creek monsters, the little bugs that people who fish for require to get fish and that fish eats. This creek doesn't have enough of those, and that's because, in large part, of sediment pollution. So this is making an impaired waterway more impaired. What happens when the sediment hits Falls Lake?
Yeah, if you want to see what happens, go on Google Earth and put in the credit union address, and then go a little bit to the northeast and look at Falls Lake, and you can see the Google Earth satellite view. You can really obviously see this sediment going right into the lake and discoloring that whole creek arm in the lake.
I guess I meant, could you talk about how Falls Lake is a water source, a drinking water source, so how does this get cleaned up? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. Yeah. So this is a problem for Durham because this is in Durham, and it's a problem for Raleigh because Raleigh drinks the water out of Falls Lake. And you can see it from satellite if you go on Google Earth, but we also have taken little planes and flown over and gotten some really compelling images where you can see this dirt getting into Falls Lake and our drinking water source. So what happens is sediment isn't just bad for aquatic species, right? It's not just bad for those little creek monsters I was talking about and the fish. It's bad for humans because this dirt, what it binds to is nutrients. So excess nitrogen, phosphorus, that leads to algal blooms. That's really hard to treat in drinking water. And cyanobacteria, algal blooms is a problem for humans, a problem for dogs. If you read the news and are familiar with that, you hear about it every summer. This adds to that particular problem. And sediment co-occurs with more elevated levels of bacteria. So we don't want to be interacting with, playing with. I've talked to so many amazing local community members in my time sampling out here who told me stories about playing in this creek, who told me stories about like growing up and being a part of this waterway. And it's no longer safe to do so because of the sediment pollution. So it does matter, not just to the critters, but to us humans.
How far is the sediment being carried into the lake?
As far as we can tell from the sky, it looks like it's making its way to right around Rolling View Marina, where the owner of the marina essentially is terrified that his business is no longer going to be viable. But it's not really getting too much further than that, as we can tell from the sky, but it's filling the lake.
So how do we hold the bad actors accountable? I mean, if for them this is even if they get fined, it's just a cost of doing business.
If it's okay with you, I would love for all of us to kind of ponder that question as we walk, and then circle back on that at the end and come out with some solid, what can we do about this?
I
I believe the owner of Golden View Marina, I think he said it's filled that marina in 2 feet.
Wow.
And so that's going to change the amount of drafts on the boats, the size of the boats that could come in and out of the marina. I mean, 2 feet of sediment. And you can't dredge it because it's all this drinking water. So you can't block it off and then dredge it, try to get it out, you know.
Yeah, it's 2 feet in 2 years.
2 feet
I was
in
gonna
2
ask
years.
how
Yeah.
long. Wow.
So the
I mean,
last time
look at
they,
it. It's rampant. I mean, and every stream is just going in there just like this. I mean, it doesn't take long when it's that much sediment just flowing straight through there 24/7.
24/7.
I want to do a turbidity monitor. Can I have you hold this for me? Thank you. This is called a YSI. It measures turbidity, which is the amount of sediment in the water. That's the main thing that we're paying attention to today. But it also shows other things like the amount of oxygen, the pH balance. It shows you how conductive the water is, and other interesting things like that. So just for context, the state standard, so how the state defines a healthy waterway in terms of turbidity is if the turbidity number is below 50 nephelometric turbidity units, NTUs. So that's for surface water, not for drinking water. Drinking water has to be at 10, treated to 10. So, but surface water, healthy is 50 and under. If it's over 50, it's considered impaired in that moment. If it's over 50 consistently, it can be extremely detrimental to fish species and aquatic populations. What do you think this is?
A bazillion.
Let's make some, so I hear 2,500.
Is 50 a percent or 50 a
50 NTU is a number. Yeah, let's do the relatively cleaner side and see. So I'm gonna just put this probe in, and it takes continuous measurements, so it's flowing and it's gonna keep changing, but once it kind of stabilizes, I'll tell you. So what do you think this is? NTUs. 75,
175?
175, 20 I heard. It's 32.
Oh.
Wow.
So this part here is relatively, in terms of sediment. Now we're not talking bacteria, we're not talking nutrients, we're not talking other things, we're talking dirt.
Yeah.
In terms of
So
dirt,
don't drink it.
yeah, don't drink it. But it's relatively clear. I will say, compared to an unimpacted stream less than a half a mile down the road, that one usually comes up at 10 NTU, and that doesn't flow through any developments yet. So, guesses for this one again?
350?
I'd say
It's around 315, 330.
You got 300 over there.
So if you imagine 3,000, this is just 300, which is still inexcusable, right? That's not healthy.
And this number was 30 something?
This is 32. This
That's
is
10 times as.
Yeah.
yep, and they're mixing and getting into our impaired waterway and our lake. This could be then just probably, business as usual practices, dewatering operations. Essentially, there was a rain last Saturday, a significant rain. And so oftentimes for a week or more following a rain, as those sediment ponds are being dewatered, dirty water is just getting literally poured into the creek. And no violations are issued, no notices of violation, no one is held accountable for that. So.
You see all these lines? Those are from mollusks crawling across. There should be hundreds of those all around. And then if you look on the other bank over there, we're just already from that pollution, there's none.
Yeah.
They won't cross it. The adults will probably survive, but we don't have
I didn't
any.
even know we had any mollusks. That's pretty
they probably can't live because of the sediment. Does the
Right.
sediment block?
Right. Well, I was saying there should be birds here. I don't
Yeah.
see a single bird. There should be a lot. Like it's right next to a waterway. There should be a lot of birds here.
Yeah, but they're going to lay eggs, and the eggs aren't going to be viable either because the conductivity of the water comes up
Gotcha.
and they don't survive.
What are folks noticing?
It's no longer clear. One half isn't clear, the other half muddy.
Yeah,
It's all muddy.
yeah. Is that what you were saying too?
No, there's like at the edges there's like solid pieces of the sediment you can see.
Totally. Yeah, you can see what's getting in on the sides.
There's no good sand or gravel or cobble.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Like, what's a healthy stream supposed to look like on the base? Because that's not intuitive, right?
Like when I'm fishing, I look for streams that have a hard bottom, so they might have sand or gravel or cobble, mussel shells, clam shells, things like that, where when you walk, you don't necessarily sink in like this. So this is really silty to me, and I wouldn't fish here if I had my fishing pool, because it's just not the type of conditions I would look for, because I think you touched on it earlier, the benthic organisms like the little insect larvae and so on don't live as well in this as they would on gravel or cobble. And the whole ecosystem is based on those as you go up. So a stream like this wouldn't support as much biodiversity as what you have in a stream that's pure with gravel, cobble, like run, riffle, pool type scenario.
Now, here's a question. If you, with the sediment level like this, are you reducing the amount of oxygen in the water, which also has a big impact on larger aquatic species?
Yeah.
Sediment in the water column does come with reduced oxygen content, and that can be a result of just too much dirt, essentially, and not enough oxygen. But often what that is because it comes with algal blooms, and when algae bloom, they eventually die. When they die, they consume oxygen in the water, and so you're losing oxygen in the algal cycle.
So if you dug down underneath there, is there gravel? Is this just like years and years of sand? Okay,
So
gotcha.
this is, and it's super easy to think this is natural. I will say, we are in the Triassic Basin. This has become a total buzzword, thanks to the work of people around here trying to make it a buzzword. Thank you everyone for making this nerdy word Triassic Basin important. But these soils are unique to this area. Half of Durham County, a little more than half of Durham County has these soils. Parts of Cary has these soils, but most of Wake County, besides the Cary area, does not. So they are highly erosive. Meaning that if you disturb dirt over here and it rains, it's much more likely to run off and end in the creek. And then when it does erode and it does get in the creek, the particles are so fine. These are actually the finest soil series in terms of particle. So they aren't dense enough to settle, and they just kind of float and stay suspended for a long time. I've taken samples where it'll sit on my countertop for a week before the sediment starts to settle to the bottom, and you can see it coming down. So it's a particular problem here. What's going around, you're probably wondering, what is this thing of bugs? Those are the little creek monsters I was talking about. That is a Plecoptera, which, actually no, I'm sorry, that's a Trichoptera. That is one of the special critters that are considered indicative of healthier waterways. That was not found here. But that's just to give you a sense of kind of what those tiny little creatures, what's at stake here with all the sediment. So those creatures typically live on the bottoms of these creek beds. They live in rocks and gravel and leaf riffles, and you can find them in all of those natural features that we were just talking about. But with all the sediment, they literally are suffocated. They can't exist in sand. They have to have the space in between the rocks, the space in between the leaf pack. So this has become completely, uninhabitable by a lot of those tiny little creek monsters. Last thing I want to show is just, like we were saying, how much sand is deposited here. We've been wanting to do this for a long time to just kind of get a measurement. So could someone just stick this in the ground and see how far they can push it down?
Golly.
That's the right response.
I was not expecting it to go that far.
So where are we at? 22 inches. 22.
It's like 2 feet.
Now can you get it out?
Presumably there's like gravel.
I mean, it's really loose. It's really soft.
How long would it take 2 feet of sand to?
I don't know. That's what we were just saying, because we didn't start measuring before the runoff started happening.
Well, that's like Rolling View Marina, where they're 2 feet of sediment in 2 years. So
Yeah. Thank you.
Were the developers required to do an environmental impact statement before they started?
No. So depends on which one, but this developer here, so this is the Perry Farms proposal that went through last October. I mentioned it earlier, 280 acres. What we're standing in actually is the Lick Creek bottomlands. It's a natural heritage area because of Douglas bittercress, which is a threatened plant, and a few other less cool sounding plant species that are still very cool and live here. And a lot of locals who I've talked to who are amazing grew up playing in these woods. This is like a local treasure. There's a really cool like topographical feature over there that is called like the Widowmaker Hill or something. I don't know if I butchered that. But it's just like the stories, the community stories of here and people playing in this creek. But also, natural heritage registry areas are non-binding, so no one is required to protect them. But our state's program surveys all of these threatened species because it wants our regulators to protect them. So in Durham, the Unified Development Ordinance says that developers should follow recommendations in the Natural Heritage Registry. It does not say that they must. And so, unfortunately, they don't always get followed. But I will say, that was a huge part of the conversation here in Perry Farms. So they've committed to a 300-foot buffer on this river, which is much bigger than is required, the baseline. And that was part of the reason, that was part of the response to protecting this natural heritage area. I will point out that it's important to recognize that there will be utility corridors through here. So even though there will be a buffer, there will be sewer lines and water lines that are cut through this creek. So that's important to note is the invisible cost of development that we often don't talk about when the rezoning proposals are introduced is in areas that are rural that don't have the infrastructure, what are the utility corridor costs to have to go along with it? So we're watching this area. I've been monitoring here in this particular space for 18 months, and so I'm really interested to see how the changes here, the development here impacts the creek health.
Samantha, can I say one
Yeah.
thing? So also when we go back out, if you will look to your right, you'll see how close the sewer lines run parallel to this creek. So you'll see, and so as she said, when this gets developed, although we're hoping to keep the buffers, we have seen many, many times that one thing they automatically put in the buffers anyway are sewer lines. So it's not undisturbed. But the other thing I wanted to point out besides that is notice the stream trees along this stream bank. The trees eroding, and that's something that she had talked about in Grove Park where they did a stream bank erosion repair, and now they're worried, will it even hold? So, and they're not cheap. That one cost $1.4 million according to what I looked at this week. And so notice the trees, because there's a professor at NC State that particularly studies the stream bank erosion in this area, Dr. Barbara Dahl. And I encourage you to look at that study. So she's been out here, and she is documented in a UNC collaboratory study that was released in December. So I encourage you to read that.
The conversation is not about stopping development. For us, it's about doing it responsibly. And so that's kind of the context that we're waiting in right now is how do we prevent this from happening while also creating affordable homes for people to live here. Not just to live, but to thrive here. And so I have some, action items that we've been cooking up that mainly just involve helping us show up to the council meetings and to county commission meetings and to planning commission meetings when new proposals come up in sensitive areas. This is not just limited to here. If you live in downtown Durham and you live near Ellerby Creek, you've seen that Ellerby Creek is beginning to flow red due to the same problems, a new development at the headwaters. And so this is about more than just Lick Creek. It's about making sure that this doesn't happen in other places as well.
Call to action. Tie water quality standards to sediment and erosion control practices. Put a pause on more development in the Lick Creek watershed until we can assure that future construction will not harm our waterways. Thanks for watching. For more information, go to soundrivers.org and preserveruraldurham.org.